I walk through many towns in the Bay Area, low-income towns, I see nothing but boarded up shops, graffiti, uneven roads, and learning centers that have not been updated in what seems like years. But why? Don't our tax dollars go to these same improvements and many other things like our schools and recreational centers in the hopes of getting children off of the streets and lowering our crime rates? Well, what if I told you in Antioch alone, 62% of our tax dollars go to policing when only 6% go to community improvements? I'm Elisa, and I'm going to be speaking on why I think it's important that we defund our police departments. And who does this affect? This not only affects me, but it affects you, your children, your families. But why? We're the ones who are paying these tax dollars in the hopes that it will be better in our communities. But in reality, it's not, and most of our tax dollars are getting put into the police department. Today I will be shedding a light on the defunding of the police departments and retracting it from such a negative tone and adding a positive twist with advantages that go along with equally distributing funds within our communities. The points I will be speaking upon are in no way discrediting or vocalizing negatively towards the ones that keep us safe, but shedding a light on our budgets that would make a significant difference within our communities if it wasn't only distributed towards policing. Now that I have introduced and provided a small rundown of the defunding of police departments, let us dive into the first issue. Why should we defund? Much of the problem is that many people don't know where their tax dollars are going, causing a maldistribution in funds. As Philip Case states, quoting, "Police funding is inherently unfair and forces on rural forces, especially with those with sparse populations." So given that much of our populations in the East Bay are cities of smaller size compared to many other cities in the Bay Area, much of our tax dollars are being distributed unfairly, and we don't know anything about, because these police departments are getting a bigger payout. Ricky Gutierrez explains, quoting, "The controlling principle here was that the federal funds were meant to increase total resources dedicated to the purpose in anticipation of the grant reward. Much of the grants that were given to indeed put back into our communities have somehow diverted and being placed into police department budgets. As defunding becomes more prevalent today in today's society, it also becomes a widespread issue. More are aware that the majority of our community funds are not being dispersed accordingly, causing protests. These protests are not only in hopes to disperse funds properly, but also to create a movement. But which movement are you speaking of? The movement that shows that people in power are not using their power correctly and are using it towards many minority groups. And measures are not being taken to protect these minority groups. Erica Moser discusses, quoting, "Youth forces demanded that 35% of the New London Police Department budget be invested into services that support New London residents who are Black, brown, and poor." Now that I have discussed the importance of defunding police departments, let's review why some think it's an entirely bad idea. Some oppose the idea of defunding police departments. They urge that it will completely disperse many police officers, and along with an increase in crime rate and not enough police officers to combat crimes within our communities. Some would suggest that many continue to protest. There is no clear way to defund a police department. As Marianne Kendall of the Washington Post states, quoting, "Congress retains authority over district budget. Whether defunding the police is a good idea, I don't think it makes any sense. It would go nowhere." Assuming that much of the defunding process would have to go through several levels to get to where we want it to go, suggesting it does not make a clear sense to do so, circumstances, because it is not in the right moment as of today. Promoting the removal of funding in law enforcement is risky, and a few indicate that it will indeed make matters worse for every party involved. Paul Robinson of Pennsylvania Law School states, quoting, "The human nature being what it is requires rules, coercive enforcement mechanisms, if the conditions for cooperative existence are to be maintained. An abundance of issues could arise for many police departments. In the process was kickstarted. For example, loss of jobs, overworked officers, and little to no control taking place in our communities. In reality, it would mainly affect their income, given that police departments are given an abundance of support financially through our tax dollars, and would only cut their paychecks. Now I want to inform you why many of us protest to defund these police departments and why it's justifiable to us. The process of defunding police department is not only a long one, but the main goal is to only distribute tax dollars fairly, but also to bring a much needed change to an already broken system. By living in a community where dozens of parks are ridden with homelessness and our shelters are overflowing, the community and the schools are extremely old. I get to see firsthand how these funds are not being put into the community appropriately. Minorities are the first to be put in life-threatening situations. Quoting, states should require that each local police department earmark a specific percentage of its budget for officer training and accountability, Russian says of Florida law. The city of Antioch has allocated exponentially more funds to its police department compared to any other city or community. Police funding in Antioch has reached a total of $37 million, which accounts for 33% of our budget. The average police officer in the Antioch Police Department makes a minimum salary of $124,000. That's 130% higher than the national average. Defunding our local police department is a push to change. Allocate much funding into our schools and healthcare and communities. By enacting this, it could in fact have a much positive outlook within our neighborhoods. Quoting, overinvestment in policing contributes to higher rates of police misconduct and unnecessary criminalization, particularly in communities of color, Russian says of Florida law. I have now discussed the importance of defunding police departments and the many aspects of it. Let me give you a brief overview of what I explained previously. I have spoken on and discussed why we should defund police department, why it's important to many. I also reviewed the opposing side as well, and why some think it's particularly not a good idea. In conclusion, the defunding of police departments in the United States would help significantly by dispersing tax dollars accordingly and allowing a flow of improvements for our communities, as stated by Washington Post, quoting, San Francisco has joined Los Angeles in announcing a decision to curtail funds from police departments and invest in communities. That's a huge step into moving forward and allowing our communities to thrive. Our neighborhoods and crime rates would significantly decrease with this great decision. Thank you.